Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with the Pastor. Well, this week we're going to be talking about the church and the cross. Now, it's an interesting combination, but we'll first start with Matthew chapter 16. When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, which is, of course, the headwaters of the Jordan River, he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And so they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," which means that's just his father, Simon by Jonah, "for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Now, it's interesting because he says this. Now, as Peter is not necessarily the first pope. He is, but that's not what Jesus is building his church on. He's building his church on the concept of you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's what he's building his church on. And he said the kingdom of Hades will not be able to come against this church. And he's sitting in Caesarea Philippi, and there's a huge hole in the side of the mountain, a giant cave, which the pagans used to use to sacrifice, and it was called the gates of hell. So you could just see Jesus sitting there with his disciples looking up at this mountain with a huge hole in the side of it and pointing at that and said, "Even the gates of hell shall not prevail against my church." Now, it's interesting because he says the keys, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed on earth, loosed in heaven. But Peter is always shown carrying keys. And it's because in the Middle Ages, of course, most people were illiterate, couldn't read, but they knew pictures. So when you would see Peter pictured, he would be carrying keys, so they knew instantly it was Peter. If you saw John the Beloved, there would be an eagle, because John would soar, especially in the book of Revelation. And Andrew would be the X, because he was supposedly crucified on the cross in the form of an X. So they would use different signs for different apostles so that people would know who they are. And he would, from that time on, Jesus, Matthew says, he began to show them, his disciples, that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests. But the disciples really didn't understand this, because he's talking about the suffering that's going to be required of the Messiah. And they're not understanding this, even though the scriptures say, Psalm 118, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. The stone so there was going to be a lot of rejection for the Messiah. And Isaiah says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted, but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, and the chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed." So there's this whole thing going on where they don't really understand what it is he's saying. He's identifying as, "You are the Christ." And so he says, yes, and they're going to be the pillars of the church, but they're not understanding, because a whole lot of things have to go on before they fully get it. So hang on, and we're going to talk about this again tomorrow. So God bless you, and we'll see you again then.